The court is now in session. As planned, today we resume hearing testimonies of experts Chandler, questions to be put by the prosecution. Greffier, please report on the attendance of the parties and relevant individuals called to attend this courtroom by the chamber. Ms. Saikowati, can you report on this status? Greffier, good morning, Mr. President. All parties are present. Thank you. The President. Thank you. Before handing over to the prosecution to continue their questionings to the expert, the chamber would like to rule on two requests. The first one is the request to place documents by the defense counsel for Nuon Chea, and another one is the request by the defense counsel for Mr. Ieng Seri not to sit this Friday. Now, the oral decision of the trial chamber for the Nuon Chea defense team. The chamber is seized of Nuon Chea's second Rule 87 for request to use documents during the examination of expert David Chandler, document number E172/27/2. In this request, the Nuon Chea defense team seeks to put another 11 new documents before the chamber on the grounds previously specified in its first Rule 87 for request, document number E172/27/1. For the same reasons as given in its own oral decision of the 18th July 2012, the chamber rejects the Nuon Chea defense application. The chamber's second decision is as follows, and I would like to hand over to Judge Sylvia Cartwright to rule on this request. You may proceed, Judge.
Thank you, President. The trial chamber has deliberated on the request made by the Defence Counsel for Ieng Seri, Mr. Carnavas, and has decided to decline it. The reasons are as follows. The application itself was that the chamber not sit on Friday, the 20th of July, due to a pre-existing commitment made by Mr. Carnavas to attend and lead a seminar. The reasons for declining the request are as follows. The parties have known since the outset of this trial that although the chamber would try to ensure that Fridays were kept free of sitting commitments, the parties must be flexible because there would be occasions when it was necessary to sit on a Friday. This is one of those weeks because we have lost 2 days of sitting time already. In his oral submissions yesterday, Mr. Carnavas drew an analogy between the request made by the prosecutors for a delay in the start of this week's proceedings due to the illness of one of its prosecutors who was scheduled to lead the questioning of the expert Professor Chandler. And in Mr. Carnavas's submission, if we, having granted that application, we were obliged to grant his. There is no clear analogy between the two situations. The prosecutors could not have anticipated the illness of one of its members, and as was noted yesterday, the prosecutors have already been criticised for not having in place a fallback position in the event of a sudden emergency such as they were faced with. There is no such clear situation in relation to the request made by Mr. Carnavas. He has known of this commitment which he made for the Friday of this week, and he has known of it, presumably, for some time. He ought to have anticipated the possibility that the court would be obliged to sit this Friday and had in place an alternative. In any event, he has national co-counsel who is well qualified and experienced and will be available to represent Ieng Sari tomorrow. Finally, the Chamber has taken into account the absence of Mr. Carnavas for tomorrow and will make sure that the questioning by the Ieng Sari team does not begin until Monday of next week. That is the decision of the Chamber. Thank you, Mr. President.
The President. Just Counsel, what matter do you intend to raise? Please inform the Chamber first of all the topics you intend to raise. Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia to proceed first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. Just very briefly, for the same reasons that I articulated yesterday, or I should say attempted to articulate, we take exception to the ruling that was just read out with respect to our motion on the admission of documents. Those documents are clearly relevant. They're in the public domain. No one objects to them. There's no prejudice to any party. They should be admitted. We should be allowed to use them. Thank you.
Yes, Judge, please.
Yes, thank you, President. I just want to make it clear that the Nguyen Chia defence team, as all defence teams, have the right to appeal any decision, and the Chamber does not see the necessity for making an objection for the record. You have that right in any event, and whether it's an appeal that would fit under our rules at the time of the verdict or an immediate appeal, you have that right. There is no need to make repeated objections to the rulings. So I hope we've clarified that for you, Mr. Iannuzzi.
Your Honor, it is my national practice to make exceptions for the record, so I will continue to do that, and I think it benefits the public as well.
We do not require you to make exceptions. It may be your national practice. It is not the practice here. We will assume that each time the court makes a ruling that is adverse to you, that you will consider whether or not you will appeal. There is no need, and the President will not expect any such objections for the record in the future. Thank you.
The President. Yes, Mr. Carnavas, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. I have three matters. One is Mr. Ieng Sari's presence and his health. Two, an ex parte communication that occurred between the prosecutor and Mr. Chandler yesterday after you left the bench. And three, we wish to know what exact documents Mr. Chandler reviewed over the night, and we will be making this a continuing request since he is on the stand, he is under oath, and he should have been prepared, and and a request was made for him to keep track of all of the material that he was going to be reviewing in preparation for his testimony, And from what we heard yesterday, he intentionally and deliberately ignored that instruction from the court. So those are the three topics. First, Mr. Ingsari's health. I am told by Mr. Ingsari that he is unable to sit here for long periods of time, especially in the morning, because not only of his back, but also because he needs to use the restroom almost every 5 or 10 minutes, and it's exhausting. I've attempted to, and I say attempted, to meet with the doctor and to get from the doctor his medical opinion. Shockingly, and it may be the practice in Cambodia, but I'm unaware of anywhere else in the world, the doctor is unwilling to explain to us what exactly is wrong with Mr. Ingsari. Instead, he indicated that he passed along a report and to the chamber, and so I'm left with my client's representations to me. In that, since we are in this position, we respectfully request for the doctor to answer what exactly is his position, what is the medical opinion concerning Mr. Ingsari's presence. He has been following the testimony from the holding cell. He is participating. We are receiving instructions. But we do think that the constant having to get up and going to the toilet every 5 minutes and the pain in his back certainly interferes with his right to effectively participate in his own defense. So that's the first matter. As far as the ex parte communication, I noticed that there was a communication going on between the prosecutor and Mr. Chandler. It would appear that Mr. Chandler initiated the conversation. I wasn't aware of it initially, but I saw that there was ongoing, and I brought it to the attention. In fact, I yelled from here that such communications are forbidden. I think it is wholly improper for a witness who is on the stand to then be having communications with the prosecutor. Now, Mr. Chandler, albeit the son of a lawyer, may not be aware that that is the practice. The prosecutor and the lawyers ought to know that once a witness is on the stand, there should be no communications. I was informed by the prosecutor that it was merely for scheduling purposes. I don't care what it was about. The answer should have been, Mr. Chandler, I can't speak to you. If you wish to speak, if you wish to make inquiries about the scheduling, bring that up to those who are handling you. I think we need clear guidance. It may have been an overlap or a lapse. Nonetheless, I take these matters very seriously, and I think we all should. It's not a civil party. This is an expert witness. He's on the stand. He's under oath. And he's consulting documents as he's going along. And from his own public admissions, everybody here, all of the accused are guilty, and he opined as to what he thinks the accused will be doing in court. So in light of all of these circumstances, I think we need some clear guidance. And I can understand the prosecutor being in a very awkward position where the witness comes up, and obviously he's very close to the witness, and the witness is merely asking for scheduling, but nonetheless, we need a clear guidance. And lastly, Mr. President, if Mr. Chandler is on the stand and he's testifying, and he had weeks and months to prepare, and he's the doyen of the historians on Cambodia, we want to know what material he's consulting. And I don't want to hear some global answers such as the closing order. What are the exact documents that he's looking at to prepare himself and perhaps recalibrate his testimony to fit the prosecution's brief? Because that's what we're submitting he would be doing because of his publicly stated positions thus far. And I know that he's not under any instructions, but I think it's only human, it's within human nature to recalibrate your answers in anticipation of what may be happening. So those are the three topics, Mr. President. And perhaps you may wish to ask questions of the doctor first so we know whether Mr. Ingsari should continue to be present in court this morning, or whether he should go to the holding cell and participate, as he has been doing, throughout most of the proceedings. Thank you very much.
The President. Mr. Michael Kanavas, could you indicate again whether you are making a request or you require that the chamber seeks recommendation from the doctor? Are you making a usual request that your client be permitted to be present in a holding cell by waiving his presence to be in this courtroom? And what is the reasons to support your request? Is it the opinions of the doctors treating the accused persons who are detained at the ECCC detention facility? It is not clear in the Khmer version regarding the request.
My apologies. Perhaps I was speaking too quickly. I don't know what the doctor's opinion is, because the doctor refuses to communicate with me even though he is my client. I find that practice abhorrent. I should know the status of my client's health. So I don't know exactly what the doctor is going to say. But what my client is saying is that he's unable to be here in court today because of his back pain and because of the constant stress put upon him, where after every 5 or 10 minutes he needs to use the restroom, and that exhausts him. Obviously, it's a request for him to participate in the holding cell. We've been making these requests. He's been signing the waivers. It was you, Mr. President, that ordered that Mr. Ingsuri be present here today. As he sits here today, he's unable to participate in his own defense. Being present physically does not mean being present mentally. And the right to assist in one's defense also means the right to be able to concentrate, to hear the testimony, and if necessary, to give guidance and instructions to the lawyers. We do have communications with Mr. Ingsuri during the breaks. So we respectfully request, based on what we have been told by our client, not by the doctor, because the doctor who's sitting there refused to even acknowledge my presence when I was communicating to him. He merely walked away very arrogantly. Now, maybe this is his part of the training, but I find that to be abhorrent. I expect at least some answer, such as, this is the state of his health. So I don't know what the doctor is going to be saying. But I do know what Mr. Ingsuri is saying, and everybody can see Mr. Ingsuri right now. He's in utter pain because of his back. So we are making that request. He has signed a waiver, and he's waiving his presence here, but he will be participating in the holding cell. So that is my request with respect to Mr. Ingsuri. If you are not aware of what the doctor's report was, then perhaps the doctor can take the stand, be placed under oath, and give testimony. But I am told that he gave his information to the legal officer of the tribunal, or the trial chamber. Thank you.
The President. National Council for Civil Party, you may proceed. Mr. Pik Ang. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. I only have a brief comments concerning what Mr. Kanavas has raised, particularly about the no response from the doctor to him. I think it is not strange for a treating doctor not to answer to someone else who is not a judge. In any event, if he is required to explain the matter, he can be called in as an expert or a witness before the court. Likewise, a witness or experts are not required to communicate directly to any party outside the court. Only when the person is called before the court as a witness or expert could parties ask the person. This can apply the same things to the matters that Mr. Canavas raised about the communication between the prosecution and Mr. Chandler. The President, Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want to confuse the discussion, so I have a short addition to make to the third point raised by my colleague, Mr. Carnavas. Do you want me to make it now, or do you want to provide the prosecution the chance to respond to the other issues raised by my colleague?
Thank you. International Co-Prosecutor, do you wish to take the floor in order to respond to the observations by the Defense Counsel?
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. Good morning, Your Honours. As a preliminary point, I want to say that what we're confronting now is a pattern of behaviour by Defence Counsel of making requests and submissions at the start of the day when prosecution is scheduled to examine witnesses, which inevitably eat into our time allocations. We will have spent another half an hour today, and yesterday, out of its 2.5 days, the prosecution was able to spend just over half a day examining the expert. But moving on to the points raised by Mr. Carnavas, and point number one being Ieng Sari's health, I'll be very brief. The prosecution has obviously no objection to Mr. Carnavas, with the authority of his client, speaking to the doctors, but this is a matter for the chamber. Secondly, participation from the holding cells is in effect participation in the proceedings, the same as being upstairs, insofar as the accused have access to their lawyers and access to a video feed from the proceedings. Again, we will leave the matter to Your Honour's discretion as to what the most appropriate way to proceed. Secondly, on the issue of alleged ex parte communications, I have to say we are both surprised and shocked by this matter being raised in court, as Mr. Carnavas himself indicated. And I hate to deal with these matters in court, but I do want to state them clearly for the record. Professor Chandler came up to our bench to inquire about scheduling, and my response was exactly as Counsel Carnavas suggested, to ask him to speak to the chamber about scheduling for this week and next week. I take great exception at Counsel Carnavas raising this matter in open court when I explained to him yesterday what the matter was about, and he could see that the communication ceased very quickly. Lastly, on the issue of documents, I don't think we need to waste any more time on this, Your Honours. The Professor has been asked to prepare a list. He indicated he has already prepared that list in part. He will continue to add to it. As we go along today, we will be showing specific documents to the Professor, and he will be opining in part based on those documents. So this mystery that the defence wishes to pretend is in place needs to be dispelled. We will be dealing with specific documents. There is nothing controversial about the Professor looking at them and giving his opinions based on years of research. And while I'm on that matter, I also wish to record our objection to both yesterday and today the counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari effectively seeking to intimidate the witness. We heard yesterday comments about their intention to place Professor Chandler under great fire. We heard today, again, offhand comments about his supposed bias. None of these matters relate to their application to do with documents. This is a blatant attempt to intimidate the witness. It is a blatant attempt to, if you like, give him a preview of the attack that they think they can put him under. And it is an attempt to make it more difficult for him to testify. So we take great exception to it. Your Honours, subject to you dealing with the issue of Ieng Sari's attendance in court, we would like to get on with the examination, if at all possible, in the shortest amount of time. Thank you.
The President, you are not allowed. We cannot go back to the same issue. One party can raise the matter only once. Greffier of the court, do we have the record of the treatment of Mr. Ieng Sari by the ECCC doctor for today's morning? The President, you are not allowed to proceed. We will proceed with another matter. Must get sovereignty. Mr. President, the doctor has already examined the accused, but there is no record of the examination yet. The President, in order to deal with this matter, the doctor is now instructed to be on stand, to be right next to the expert. The President, International Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia, do you wish to raise another matter, or do you intend to raise the same issue? Otherwise you are not allowed to do so, because the matter has been fully heard by all three parties. Or do you wish to address another new matter? You are not allowed to proceed with the same matter here. The Chamber has heard enough grounds for its consideration. Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia, can you inform the court, first of all, the matter that you intend to raise? Again, you are not allowed to raise the same issue unless it is a new one.
Mr. President, as I told you in my first submission this morning, it is related to the third issue raised by Mr. Carnavas. In order to facilitate your proceedings, I proposed to discuss it after the other issues were raised and discussed by the prosecution, the health of Mr. Ieng Sari and the ex parte communications. So I submit that I should be allowed to give my submission on the issue that is related to the documents as discussed by Professor Chandler. It will be a quite simple addition, taking no more than 1 or 2 minutes.
The President, Yes, you will be granted that opportunity to proceed, but now the doctor is before us ready to provide his medical opinion concerning the health status of Mr. Ieng Sari. Doctor, you may proceed. Doctor, I would like to report to the chamber. My name is Tong Hong. I am the physician attached to the ECCC. Subject: the health status report of the accused Ieng Sari. As of 8 o'clock in the morning, his blood pressure is 8 out of 13 and 13 out of 8. He is as a recommendation, he can participate in the proceeding for only an hour or two a day. Judges, do you have any question to put to the medical doctor? How about other parties? Do you have any question to put to the medical doctor concerning his report of the health status of the accused?
I do, Mr. President, but I see that Judge Laverne is conferring with other judges.
The President. Now, the Chamber has decided that we would not grant time to parties to put questions to the physician due to time constraint, and I would like to thank the medical doctor for your report. And according to your recommendation, Mr. Ieng Sari may participate in the proceeding for about 1 to 2 hours, and the Chamber will decide on this matter before we adjourn in the first half of this morning. So, physician, you may now return to your seat. The President. Now, my apology. Now, the International Defense Council for Nuon Chea, the floor is now yours, but we would like to remind you to be brief in your submission because we have spent a lot of time this morning on these matters.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief while trying to speak slowly to not incommodate the translators. We heard Professor Chandler say yesterday that he had studied the closing order before his testimony before your chamber, and I want to make it clear that we do not take issue with that fact as such. But as Professor Chandler has indicated, this closing order has changed his mind on certain issues. We think it's relevant to note that the closing order is no more than a conclusion by the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges. And I would like to add that it is an indictment, and therefore it is inculpatory by nature. Considering that, I think it's important going forward with the testimony of Mr. Chandler that we know, that all the parties know, whether or not he had access to all the underlying documents of the closing order. And if not, which particular documents did he have access to, and which particular documents did he not have access to? And I recall something the professor said yesterday, and I do not have the transcript, so I forget the specific wording, but I believe Professor Chandler stated, "I wish I had had access to that information or to those documents." Professor Chandler could clarify that to us. So it is clear that certain information in the closing order is new. We would like to know whether Professor Chandler, bases his change of opinion on certain matters on certain new documents that he did not have access to before, and if so, what those documents were. I will also state, just to be clear, that it is quite obvious to us that Professor Chandler did not have access to all documents that underlie the closing order, simply because they are of a confidential nature and they were produced by the OCIJ during the investigation. So to a certain extent, Professor Chandler cannot know the underlying documents. Again, we do not place any blame on Professor Chandler or anybody else for that matter regarding that circumstance, but it should be clear going forward what documents has he relied on, because as my colleague Mr. Carnavas has pointed out, the testimony of Mr. Chandler has become muddled in a way, has become tainted in a way by reading the closing order. Again, we place no blame on anyone for that. It is simply human nature, but we need to verify what Professor Chandler bases his knowledge on today before you. So perhaps today will be too late for Professor Chandler to provide this kind of information, but we will be coming back to this issue during our questioning of Professor Chandler. So perhaps the trial chamber could instruct, perhaps as a matter of fair warning to the professor, that we will be coming back to this issue so the professor could prepare for this eventuality. Those were my submissions. Thank you.
The President, thank you, and I give the floor to the representative of the prosecution. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honours. I think my learned friend has both asked and answered the question. The attachments to the closing order are indeed confidential, and therefore the professor is obviously very unlikely to have had access to them. I'm surprised we're coming back to this point, because I believe we had found a way forward. Essentially, that we will be taking the professor through specific documents and through his specific conclusions, where he is of the view that those conclusions have been altered or affected by the closing order. We have asked him to so indicate. And I think that's where the matter can rest. The closing order is, of course, a set of allegations which the professor has had access to, and it may have provided him additional information, and he will indicate that. I don't think it would be appropriate at all and counsel indicates this as well, to expect the professor to now try and reconstruct the supporting materials for the closing order to which he doesn't have access. He can be asked by the defence in their own examination what the bases are for his conclusions which they challenge.
But
The President. First, I wish to remind the expert that you are called to testify in a capacity as a witness. So we would like to remind you not to communicate with any parties to the proceeding. That's why immediately when the chamber calls a break, we ask the court officer to accommodate you so that you will not communicate with other parties during the breaks. And on a separate matter concerning the use of the various documents, particularly the ones identified in the closing order as well as the footnotes in the closing order raised by the party, it is the same matter that has already been ruled upon by the chamber, and I would like to hand over to Judge Sylvia Cartwright to clarify on that further.
ដើម្បីបន្ត
But I give the floor to the prosecution to continue his line of questioning. And if possible, you can clarify the time allocation between the prosecution and the civil party lead co-lawyers, how you would allocate times among yourself for the 2 days and a half allocated to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the last issue, we hope there will be some scope to accommodate us based, in light of, rather, all of the delays that we've experienced since yesterday. If we are still able to use up the entire 2.5 days allocated to us within those 2.5 days total, we will take close to 2 days and leave the rest to the civil parties. I want to stress that we will absolutely try to move expeditiously and we will try and deal only with the most important issues. But approximately 2 days or perhaps a little bit less for the prosecution and then the remainder for the civil parties. And would you like me to proceed?
The President, thank you. The civil party lead co-lawyer, you may proceed.
Mr. President, once again, I have to express my regret that the civil parties can only use the time left over to them by the prosecution. I quite understand that the prosecution has to use the time it needs for its questions, but another party, namely the civil parties, has to be able to make use of the amount of time that it needs. We need 5 hours, and we told Susan Lamb that we need those 5 hours, and here we have beside me my colleagues who have been preparing these subjects in a very serious manner, who have come from abroad to do so. And it's quite inconceivable that within a reasonable time, as usual, incidentally, that the civil parties shouldn't be allowed to ask the questions that they wish to ask. And so we do rather insist that we be allowed the 5 hours that we are entitled to. Thank you.
according to the revised schedule of the chamber, which has already been well circulated to the parties, we would rather shorten the time allocated for the examination of this witness, and there is no possibility for an extension of time for parties as such. So we once again urge the prosecution and the civil parties to discuss among themselves how to best allocate the time. And the prosecution has the burden of proof against the accused, and the other parties will have to provide other arguments or counter-arguments to the prosecution, so there won't be any additional time for parties concerning that matter. Thank you.
Good morning, Professor Chandler. Fortunately, we're almost halfway through our first session, so I will be skipping a number of subtopics and simply try and touch upon the main areas in the first subject matter which I wish to deal with, which is the, as I indicated yesterday, pre-1975 key events and development of policies that you also referred to yesterday. In your books, Brother Number One and Tragedy of Cambodian History, you trace the origins of the Cambodian movement in Cambodia. We unfortunately don't have the time to go through the entire chronology. So what I might do is simply start at 1960, which is one of the dates that you consider significant in your books, and take that as our first milestone, if you like. Now, again, in the interest of time, I will ask my assistants to give you hard copies of these two books and with the excerpts that we will be dealing with, but I will read the excerpts, and perhaps we won't go to the screen in order to save time. Mr. President, with your permission, we would give the Professor hard copies so that he can refer to them as I read.
Yes, you may proceed. Court officer is instructed to obtain the document from the prosecution and present it to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. Professor, you just a minor housekeeping matter. You will note that your microphone switches on with a slight delay after I finish. The reason for that is that the AV unit is simply waiting for the interpretation of my answers into Khmer and French to be complete, so that we have a full record. So if you could wait for the microphone to come on and then give us your answers. Looking at Tragedy of Cambodian History, and this is in Chapter 3, the document number is E3/14. This particular book is only available in English. The relevant ERN is 00193-197. So if you look through those hard copies, if you simply look for numbers 97 in the top left-hand corner. This is a passage that I wish to focus on, and it's a discussion of the 1960 Congress of the Communist Party. You state, the Congress has received considerable scholarly attention. Much about it remains uncertain, but three facts emerge. One is that Saloth Sar was appointed at the Congress to the number 3 position on a newly constituted Central Committee just below Tu Samut and Nuon Chea. The second is that the KPRP changed its name on this occasion to the Khmer Workers' Party, placing it semantically on a level with the VWP, the Vietnamese Workers' Party. We also know that Son Ngoc Min, in absentia, earned a place on the Central Committee. And the brief following passage, Ieng Sary and Koi Tuon were the only intellectuals besides Saloth Sa to be brought onto the committee. The next passage is in the same book, over the page. Moreover, in view of the Communists' activities in Cambodia over the next 6 years or so, there is no possibility that resolutions passed at the meeting in 1960 espoused a truly independent line. Nonetheless, in hindsight, the participants were clearly breaking into factions. One of these, the eventual victor, was Pol Pot's own. Another, with links to the ICP, the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, and roots in the eastern part of the country, was personified by Sao Pim. Now, if I could ask you, Professor, to describe for the Chamber your findings and your conclusions as to the significance of this Congress, and of course you point to certain appointments within the committee and the change of the party's name. Could you expand on this for us briefly?
Thanks very much, and good morning. And before I answer your question, I'd like to apologize to the Court for what was clearly an oversight on my part in making a very brief moment of conversation with the prosecutor. I was no ill intention in doing that. It was my mistake, and I'm sorry for it. Now, as regards the passage cited, the Congress of 1960 was marked by Pol Pot, and particularly in things that he's written and said, as the official date of the start of the Communist Party. The Communist Party of Cambodia, saying it was really founded in 1951, but we don't talk about that because the genuine foundation occurred in 1960. And what happened in the genuine foundation event, of course, was that Pol Pot himself came onto the Central Committee for the first time, and along with Ieng Sary and Koi Tuon, and this group eventually constituted a faction. Might be too strong a word to use, and I'm not referring to any subsequent documents in the closing order or anything when I say that, but I see now this book that may have been, faction might be a strong word to use this. Elements is more likely. These people did not break apart in later times. But this was a very significant meeting, and it was a place where the Communist Party began to move out of its period of inactivity and toward having a set of proposals that were felt to be appropriate for Cambodia and to be no longer under the guidance, formal or informal, of Vietnam and the Indochina Communist Party. So yes, this is a very significant occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Moving on to the next significant date, or a date that you consider significant, and it is the 1962 period. And again, it's dealt with in both Brother Number One and Tragedy of Cambodian History. In the interest of time, I'll simply read a passage from the Tragedy of Cambodian History, and might need to refer to the other book as well. But at ERN 00193-209, again, this is a English ERN, the only one available, we have the following passage. Soon after these events, the WPK's Urban Committee, perhaps fearful of Sihanouk, convened a General Assembly. Some documents referred to it as a Congress. Its main decision was to confirm Saloth Sa as the Secretary of the WPK's Central Committee, replacing Tu Samut, who was now presumed to have been killed. 2 of the 12 positions on the enlarged committee were taken by intellectuals who had studied in France, number 3 Ying Seri and number 11 Son Sen. Son Ngoc Min in Vietnam was again elected in absentia, and Vaughan Vet joined the committee for the first time. I will also read, for the purposes of continuity, before I ask you some questions, a relevant passage from Brother Number 1. This is a document. I do apologize. The passage I just read was from Brother Number 1, so that was E3/17. No, there is a mistake in our notes. No, that was from Tragedy. We're moving on to Brother Number 1. Brother Number 1 is E3/17. This is available in English and Khmer. The relevant English ERN is 00392-977-8, and Khmer ERN 00821-727. Again, I'll be very brief with this passage. You state, by then, Sa and Seri were both high-ranking members of the party. Their positions had been confirmed at a special party congress convened in the wake of the Siem Reap demonstrations, but before Sihanouk's return. At the meeting, Sa replaced Tu Samut as secretary of the party. Nunchia kept the second position. And a little bit further down in that same, on that same page, you state, what was important about the Congress was that it locked Saloth Sa, Nunchia, and Ying Seri into positions in the party hierarchy that they retained for many years. I apologize for the length of some of these passages. If you could elaborate for us on the importance of this 1962 Congress following the disappearance of Tu Samut and what you describe about the locking into positions in the party hierarchy of Pol Pot, Nunchia and Ying Seri.
Sure. I don't think there's much to expand on from what I said there. This leadership group of the party, there's some question later on, some ambiguity about whether Ying Seri or Son Sen was number 3, but that doesn't matter. I mean, Son Sen was also in this very much leadership group, starting to move toward a sort of consolidation. I think some other writers have said, this meant a kind of a semi-coup by the French-educated members of the party. I think it's very important to remember that Nguyen Chia has never been in France, and it was a second man for a long time, was not subject to French intellectual patterns and so forth. I think some of that is a bit of a misleading suggestion that this is somehow sort of a French faction. It's just that some of them had studied in France. But it's significant that these 4 people, including Son Sen, then formed basically a core of leadership that continued later on once they came to power. Should be said, of course, that the only importance of this Congress is that they did come to power, because this is a very ill-equipped, ineffective, frightened, concealed party. That it wasn't. It's rather like the childhood of Mao Zedong is only important because of what happened later. This is important for the history of the party, but its intrinsic importance is only to these particular people because they were actually hoping, to seize power. This is the reason they were forming their party. They hoped at some time to be victorious, and so they're the optimists in the room, surrounded by people who had no expectation that anything like that would ever happen.
Thank you, Professor, and I thank you for your brief answers. We will move forward now, skip a number of years in the interest of time, and make a brief pause at 1966 and 1967. These are discussed again in Brother Number 1 and in Tragedy of Cambodian History. In both books, chapters 5 are relevant. to save time, there are a number of important passages here, but again, to save time, I'll just read two very short ones from Brother Number 1. This is at English ERN 00392-988 and Khmer ERN 00821-739. Professor, you indicate here, and I quote, and I should say that you're dealing here with a 1966 study session, which you state was held in a new headquarters in Ratnakiri. And you state, quote, "The escalation of the Vietnam War and developments in Indonesia and Cambodia made the 1966 study session a turning point in the history of the Cambodian Communist Party because they persuaded SA that the party's tactics had to be changed." Then over the page, you state the following: SA and the others made two important tactical decisions at the 1966 study session. They changed the party's name from the Revolutionary Workers' Party to the Communist Party of Kampuchea, and they moved some of their key personnel to the remote province of Ratnakiri in Cambodia's northeast. Could you tell us, again briefly, why you considered that by this stage the party's tactics, that the leadership had decided that the party's tactics had to be changed, and that included the change of the party name and move of key personnel?
Yes, I think the events in Indonesia were from 1965, 1966. An estimated 500,000 alleged communists were put to death by the forces of the Indonesian government. Was this, if you want to use a terrible phrase, kind of a wake-up call to the Cambodian communists. They said, here's a country where the Communist Party has just about been wiped out by the government. And they were a small group. They felt, perhaps it was in their interest to move away from the populated areas of Office 100 in eastern Cambodia to a more secure base. I think also felt that they could no longer operate with any kind of an open front operations inside Cambodia because they were in danger. So the whole party went underground and in effect disappeared. It was and it was in this area, this base in northeastern Cambodia, where they remained for over the next 3 years. Basically, just we don't know exactly what they were doing, but obviously, what it seems to me they were doing was were planning policies for when they would seize power, rather than hiding from Sihanouk's police or things that they've been doing before. This is a period of policy making, a period of consolidation, and a period of also they were gaining strength. Recruits were coming to them from the cities, particularly in the local region of Ratnakiri. They recruited a fair number of minority people. So it's a crucial change, and I think the interesting point that's not mentioned in this book, but it's interesting that it seems to me the events in adjoining Vietnam, which of course are much more well known to the people in this room, perhaps are more well known than what is happening in Indonesia, were paid less attention by the Cambodian communists. They didn't mention this in their. We must change our tactics in order to play some role in the Vietnam War, but rather to protect ourselves, we must avoid what happened to we must work to avoid what happened to the Indonesian party, it was demolished. The Indonesian party was just obliterated, basically, and several tens of thousands of people were in prison after that. The ones who weren't killed were in prison for often 10 years. So it was a very scary set of events down there.
Thank you. You've indicated just now that based on your research, the party was then based, or the leadership of the party was then based in the Ratnakiri area for another 3 years. You discuss in your books, again, both in Brother Number 1 and Tragedy of Cambodian History, the Samlot uprising, as some authors have called it, and then the subsequent hostilities in January 1968, which were subsequently, if you like, described as the birth of the Revolutionary Army. Perhaps if we can rely on your memory of those passages, or if you wish, I can read them out to you. But if you're able to very briefly summarize the importance, if any, of the emergence, if you like, of armed struggle in that period between 67 and 70, and then we'll move on to post-70.
Yeah, the beginning of armed struggle was significant primarily as a historical, iconic historical event in the history of the Communist Party. It didn't amount to much. It was a handful of weapons were seized from a police station in Battambang province. There's the Samlot Rebellion has been studied extensively, but no conclusive results have come out of it to these any connections between the CPK and the rebellion. Members of the party have denied that they were connected. I think this is probably true. I think this was a disconnected a revolt conducted by individual people who were upset by government policies in that area. So, but Sihanouk saw with the Samlot rising, as I said in the book, that for the first time, Cambodians, without inspiration from overseas, or not visible inspiration from overseas, were always the enemies in the Sihanouk regime, or people who were not Cambodians, were able to revolt against his regime. So he got angry and frightened and decided to fight back. He said he decided to really crush this rebellion with great force. He'd never gone after his force had never gone after Cambodian people before to this extent. I think, I'm sorry, I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know what exactly was said, but it seems to me the natural response of Pol Pot and his colleagues would have been, okay, we'd better get an armed struggle too. There's no point postponing this because his forces are going to attack our forces. And which is indeed what started to happen in 68, 69. You started to get skirmishes between the army, which was permitted now to go after these local people, which I think they knew who they were, they knew where they were, but they didn't do anything. Started to be some fighting. So you're starting to get, I guess, the very beginnings of the Civil War do occur under the last years of Sihanouk rather than breaking out under Lonol.
Thank you. Moving on then to the 1970 period. And of course, again, you discuss this in both books. Tragedy of Cambodian History, Chapter 7 is relevant here, and Brother Number 1, mainly Chapter 5. Again, I will try and avoid reading long passages. I believe you're intimately familiar with the events here, but essentially, you describe in Brother Number 1 at English ERN 003929998 and following, and also Khmer ERN 00821-751. You describe the events following the coup, 18th of March 1970, by Sirik Matak and Lon Nol, and you also deal with the presence of Salot Tsa, or Pol Pot, in Beijing, and the negotiations, or rather communications, if you like, which take place and which culminate in the issuance of a broadcast on the 23rd of March by Norodom Sihanouk. I don't want to deal with that in great detail because these are largely matters of public record, but I will read one quote and then perhaps ask you to elaborate on the key aspects of these developments. And we're looking here now at brother number 1. This is in chapter 6 now. English ERN 00393-001 and Khmer ERN 00821752-3. And you say the following: Saloth Sar did not emerge from hiding, and it was more than a year before he was even identified as an official on Sihanouk's National Front. Inside the country, authority was supposedly placed in the hands of the 3 ghosts, Khieu Sampang, ostensibly working on Sihanouk's behalf. And a little bit further down, Sihanouk, ensconced in Beijing with an entourage of chefs, courtiers and hangers-on, was a figurehead from the start. And a little bit further on, towards the end of that paragraph, the front's publications, financed and printed in China, conveyed the impression that the guerrillas inside Cambodia were fighting on his behalf. I know I'm asking a lot. If you could give us a very brief outline of your findings in relation to the events following the coup, the decision to form a front, and then the front's emergence, and what you describe as Norodom Sihanouk's position as a figurehead.
Well, you're right. That's a complex question that goes into a lot of areas that I haven't not studied in great detail. From Sihanouk's point of view, the coup was a surprise and an enormous insult, personal insult. And when he arrived in Beijing, he was ready to make a whole lot of contradictory decisions. He was discouraged from making these decisions by Zhou Enlai, who's a friend for many years, who encouraged him to work to fight against the New Lon Nol regime. Pol Pot was known to be in Beijing at this time for reasons we don't know what they are. We don't know why he was in Beijing, but he was. They summoned Pham Van Dong up from Hanoi very quickly, and so the elements of the front, with Saloth Sar concealed, never came out forward to say he was an element of the front. Decisions were made to form this front under Sihanouk's, in quotation marks, leadership. I think he knew that this was symbolic, but he also knew that this was the most he could get, and it was a way of retaining some of his prestige, and also not just merely his prestige, but his feeling, maintaining his feeling, which I think was very deep in his character, that he was, in fact, the embodiment of the Cambodian people, and the coup people were, well, traitors. Very much a point of view that you find recurring under the Khmer Rouge regime in complete opposition. I mean, anybody who wasn't exactly with the regime was a traitor. So, yeah, the front period is an interesting period. Sihanouk acted in public as if he was the leader, but was telling, as always, telling journalists, others who said, when the time comes, they'll spit me out like a cherry pit, he said. And he had documented bad relations with Ieng Sary in Beijing. Those two just did not get along. That's a matter of record. He didn't know what the CPK's programs were. He wasn't kept in touch with that. But he knew there was something that he didn't like. Something he didn't like, something not right about where they seemed to be going, sort of a radical twist. So it's an interesting period from his point of view. I think the front never made much sense to the people who were running the party inside Cambodia, except to make sure that the 3 ghosts who were actually acting in front of, as a front in front of them, did not depart from any policies of the party that had been arranged in secret. They wouldn't let these people come out with their own policies. These were working for the CPK.
Thank you.
The President. Thank you, experts. We have received a request from our interpreters for you to slow down. so that your message can be fully interpreted. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. This was the one instruction my wife gave me before I came up here. It said, speak slowly, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Very well. Just one question on the, if you like, authority structure or the organisation of the FUNC. You indicate in the passage that we read that Norodom Sihanouk was a mere figurehead, Salaf Star very much operating behind, if you like, behind the scenes and from hiding. You also indicate that authority was supposedly placed in the three ghosts. Are you able to comment, if you have conducted research into this issue, whether or not the three ghosts, as you describe them, as they were described at the time, were in positions of authority at that particular point in time, in the early 70s? If you haven't, if this is too specific a point, then please indicate.
No, it's fine. I mean, they held the positions that they were said to hold. What they were able to do independently inside those positions is not something I'm able to answer. But it looks to me as if the evidence is not that they were ever ahead of or to the side of anything that was being decided behind them. In other words, this was not an independent body. Yes, these three men occupied the positions that they were given, but we don't know what power went with that or what they were told to do. All that is not available.
Thank you. And moving on to 1971, and here we encounter some discussion of policy as studied by you from party documents. I'm looking here at Brother Number 1, Chapter 6. Again, that was E3/17. The English ERN is 00393-008, and the Khmer ERN is 00821-759. So the last three digits, Professor, in the English version should be 008. Very brief passage that I'm interested in. Quote, after 1971, party documents became more insistent in their class analyses of Cambodian society. They stressed that cadre must be drawn from poor peasant, lower middle-class peasant and worker backgrounds, from deep down in rural areas, as one document suggested, extracted from the earth like diamonds. Relying on these categories, it was thought, guaranteed the disappearance of feudal or capitalist elements. If you could expand briefly on the policy, if any, that these documents reflected in relation to the issue of class. We just need to wait for the microphone.
Okay, sorry. As I mentioned before, it seems, although the direct evidence of what was said at these confabs is missing, that the party leadership spent the years in Ratanakiri fine-tuning and developing policies that they would put into effect when, not if, they never said if, when they came to power. So it seems to me they started to behave in a way like a party that was in power and that needed to expand its membership in order to seize power, to expand its membership. And for its membership, it felt, because it was already engaged, it was engaged in a civil war with Lon Nol, that it couldn't seek support from the kind of people it was fighting. Its support had to come, for ideological reasons, from the poorest of the poor, the so-called worker class of Cambodia, which as far as I know didn't exist. There was very little manufacturing, but these are dogmatic places from which the diamonds could be drawn from the earth. And also, to be fair to them, this was also the segment of the society that probably felt victims of inequity and so forth, had genuine objections to the traditional Cambodian government. These had already been expressed, for example, in the peasant uprising at Sam Lot.
Moving on to an issue which you discuss again in brother number one, and I should say by this point you indicate that the leadership had moved from Ratnakiri to an area near Phnom Santuk, near the Krati Kampong Tom border. An event which you deal with in brother number one, chapter 6, English ERN 00393-005, and Khmer ERN 00821-756, is a July 1976 school study session and a congress. And the relevant passage is the following. In July 1971, a, quote, party school session for the entire country, end quote, summoned 60-odd cadre to the party's headquarters in, quote, the forest in the northern zone, end quote. Salat Sa presided over the meeting, which elected an enlarged Central Committee and proclaimed that the Cambodian Communist Party had entered a new phase in its history, namely a national democratic revolution to overthrow feudalism and imperialism. And then a little bit further down in that same passage, quote, without meaning, rephrase that, without mentioning Vietnam, the text noted that the revolution must, quote, be appropriate for our country, end quote, and that the party's leaders, also unnamed, were to command all aspects of the revolution. This is you're referring to a journal, to a party journal in that second quote. If I could ask you first, what is the significance, if any, or perhaps first, what is the meaning, perhaps, of the concept of national democratic revolution to overthrow feudalism and imperialism, as you understand it, based on your research, and whether that had any significance in this period?
Yeah, the party leaders in 71, July 71, already were aware of two things. One was that primarily the North Vietnamese and NLF forces had given severe blows to Lon Nol's army. These Vietnamese forces had been aided and supported by the local Khmer Rouge forces, who were being trained and armed to a large extent by Vietnam at this stage. They knew that I think they saw to a certain extent, they saw victory in the distance but in sight. And having seen that, perceived that, they decided, they stated that their revolution, they're the judge of all this, knowing there was no discussion, had reached a new stage. And the new stage was one where they could, as it says there, attack revolution to overthrow feudalism and imperialism. Well, this is in a party document that was not accessible to Norodom Sihanouk, but Sihanouk is a person of extreme sensitivity of antennae. I think he may have sensed a slight gain of overconfidence in youngsters. This is supposition, I don't want to go too far, but that the regime is, because feudalism is a code word for him. Imperialism is a code word for the United States. And so they said this is going to be a war against the old society and America and all its all the things. So, yeah, I think it's a decisive. It was a decisive meeting, and one that marked, I think, a statement of saying where the party was going to go, and it went ahead. It went ahead in that direction when they came to power.
Thank you. And we will come back to the issue of struggle with those groups that you just described. Just looking for another minute at that Congress, in Tragedy of Cambodian History, Chapter 6, this is at ERN 00193299, you deal with decisions, again, or other decisions, if you like, from that Congress. And to summarize them, rather than to read the passage, you say that one important decision was to send Ieng Sary to Beijing. Another was to celebrate the September 30th anniversary of the Congress of 1960. And what I'm interested in is a declaration that you refer to in the context of that new party anniversary date. And this is what you say at ERN 00193299. No record of the celebration has survived, but the date chosen for the declaration of patriotic intellectuals issued in the liberated zone of Cambodia, September the 30th, was probably not fortuitous, and several members of the new committee, including Saloth Sa, Son Sen, and Khieu Samphan, signed the declaration. If I understand that passage correctly, and do please correct me if I am wrong, there is an indication that members of the new committee included Saloth Sa, Son Sen, and Khieu Samphan. Does that refresh your memory in relation to the issue of Khieu Samphan's membership of the Central Committee, which was raised in part yesterday? If not, if you're not sure about it and if you'll be speculating, then please indicate so.
Expert, please hold on. The court will hear the objection from the Defense Counsel first. Mr. Canavas, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. It seems that the way the question was phrased is rather leading. If he's going to read a passage, he can simply read the passage and then ask him to give an explanation, as opposed to him giving his interpretation, that is, the prosecution giving his interpretation and understanding what the passage means. In other words, leading the witness to a conclusion that the prosecution thinks it's necessary that fits their brief. So it's leading. We should refrain from those sorts of techniques. I'm well aware of them. The prosecution is aware of them. They can ask the gentleman what he understands it to be. And I understand that in this instance it was for purposes of refreshing a witness's witness's memory, but nonetheless, on a technical ground, I object to this sort of questioning. Thank you.
Mr. President, I think that the question was entirely appropriate in its form. I was very careful. I asked the professor to correct me, but I have, in the interest of time, I'm happy to move on and simply ask the professor what, if he could expand on that passage, ignoring my question, and simply looking at the membership of the new committee in 1971.
Let me either delay or not answer that. I have to look at some other material first before I'm absolutely clear. Might be on the preceding page, but I don't have the book with me.
If Professor, do you think you'll be able to do so in the next break of 20 minutes or perhaps over lunch?
Yeah, if someone has a complete copy of my book, I could do it in the break. I just want to see what I've said about that committee in those 2 pages there.
Mr. President, with your permission, we have a copy of the book can give it to the expert if the Chamber so orders. Otherwise, I'm mindful of time, and we're at your discretion. We can continue or take a break.
Mr. President, what book are we talking about here? Is this book in the list that you request to be discussed before the Chamber?
Yes, indeed, Mr. President. It's a tragedy of Cambodian history. The book that we've been discussing, it's on the list for these hearings, and we have a hard copy which we can provide to the expert.
Then you may proceed. The time is now appropriate for a short break. But before we break, the Chamber wishes to rule on the request by the Defense Counsel that Mr. Ieng Sari expresses his intention to waive his right not to be present directly in this courtroom, but instead he wishes to follow the proceeding from the holding cell due to his deteriorating concentration as well as his back pain, that he cannot sit for a long time in the courtroom. And according to the expert advice, Dr. Tong Hong, he also recommends that Mr. Ieng Sari can follow the proceeding for only 1 or 2 hours directly in the courtroom. Taking into consideration, as well as our observation of the health status of Mr. Ieng Sari, he should no longer stay in this courtroom, but he is instructed to follow the proceeding from the holding cell where the audio-visual equipment is connected to him, and the Chamber notes that he waives his right not to be present directly, but he will be brought to the holding cell downstairs, and through audio-visual equipment, he will be able to communicate with his defense team. So the request by Mr. Ieng Sari through his defense counsel not to be present directly in the courtroom for the rest of the day is granted, and Mr. Ieng Sari is to be brought to the holding cell downstairs below this courtroom for the remainder of the day. And AV technician is instructed to link the audio-visual means for him to follow the proceeding remotely for the rest of the day. And security guards are instructed to bring Mr. Ieng Sari and the other co-accused to the holding cell downstairs. The court is now adjourned for 20 minutes, and we will resume at 5 to 11. Court officer, please make sure that you arrange the place for the expert witness during the break, and have him back to the stand at the time indicated earlier.
សូមក្រោកឈរ